Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I feel like I have been really rediscovering historical fantasy lately and rediscovering why it's a subgenre that works so well for me, what I really love about it, which historical fantasies really stand out as the best or the coziest or the insert your favorite superlative here-ist. And I wanted to do a recommendation video of my favorite historical fantasies. Also, I'm so sorry. Apparently Wednesday is yard work day in my neighborhood. It's been going on all day. So we're just gonna ignore it and pretend it's not happening. You know, like so many things in life. So I have a stack of my favorite ones, and most of these are a real historical setting. Most of these are set in England, in either a Victorian or a Regency. I think those are the two time periods represented. But there are also a couple that aren't really our world. It's a full fantasy world, but it's a full fantasy world that is very closely modeled after a Victorian England or a Regency England. So I feel like it still fits the criteria, even though it may not technically be a historical fantasy, but it feels like a historical fantasy. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just the ones when I sat down and thought about which historical fantasies I really love. These are the ones that popped into my head first. So there are some books that may not be on this list that you feel like should be on this list. I am also going to tell you right now that Emily Wilde is not on this list because I didn't really like Emily Wilde. So there's that. Okay, moving on. So the book I'm going to start with is really my OG historical fantasy, but OG for me specifically, this is the first book I remember reading that was historical fantasy, and it's by one of my favorite authors of all time growing up. I haven't reread it in a very long time. I'm actually gonna try to reread the duology this year because I think that could be fun. But it's Marilyn the Magician by Patricia C. Reedy, and this is set in Victorian England, and our main character Kit is a pickpocket in London. So sorry, the yard work is so aggressive today. And she is caught trying to rob a traveling magician who turns out to be like an actual magician, and turns out Kit, like, magic exists in the world and Kit has some skill with magic. So Marilyn takes her on as his apprentice, and they travel throughout England, and there is also a mystery, and it's just, I like it so much. And I loved this so much when I was a young teen, and then in high school. Like I said, this is a duology. I would say, because this was published in 1991, so I would say maybe the only caveat for this series is that there is a romance later between Kit and Marilyn, which might, I don't know. I don't remember what the power dynamics are. He does take her on as his ward, so I don't know. That could go into icky territory. I need to reread this, and then I can get back to you on how it holds up. And then the book that I think is the first one that pops into everyone's head when they think of historical fantasy, Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is still my favorite Olivia Atwater book. I'm very diligently trying to read all of her published works, but this one is still my favorite. This is about Dora, who survives or escapes a fae abduction when she is a child, but she escapes because her cousin comes to her rescue and uses her sewing scissors to chase away the fairy, and in that act ends up cutting Dora's soul in half. So adult Dora really struggles in social situations. She's not very good at reading people. She's not very good at showing or feeling the appropriate emotion for the situation. She's not very good at making small talk or knowing what is appropriate to say. And you know, in good old Regency England, it's very much all about the manners. She meets Elias, who is the Lord Sorcier for the king, if I remember correctly, and they do things together and they fall in love, and it's great and I love it. And yes, I really think this book hones in on what exactly I love so much about historical fantasy, and it is that mystical element combined with all the manners and all the rules. And I don't know, I find that dichotomy or that mashup so fun and makes for really interesting books, in my opinion. And then of course I could not leave off my beloved Letters to Half Moon Street by Sarah Wallace. Not only is this historical England with a magical element, this is also a very queer norm England that Sarah Wallace has imagined for us, and I just love this series. This book in particular is epistolary, and I am such a sucker for epistolary novels. They're my favorite. They're the best. I just think this one is so lovely and so well written, and if you're looking for a really cozy romance, I don't know what else I can say to try to get you to read this book, but I want more people to read this book. And then a more recent read, and this one falls into the category of not actually being historical but feeling very historical, and that is The Lord of Starel by A.J. Lancaster. So this is definitely a fictional world that I don't remember. I don't think Lancaster names it, but it feels like historical England. Same kind of rules, maybe a little bit more, no, same kind of rules on what men and women can and can't do and polite society. In this one, the Fae realm is very closely connected to the world, and particularly to the Starel land, and yeah, and it was great. A little bit more adventure than maybe Letters to Half Moon Street or Half a Soul. I think Marilyn the Magician definitely has the most adventure out of the four so far, but this one, I thought the characters were really lovely. Again, there's the beginning of a romance that I was really into. I really loved the main character in this book and all of her messy family dynamics. It was a good time. My next one is also one that I read fairly recently, and that's These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is book one in a duology that is set in 1920s Shanghai, and it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling. So, you know, we have two rival gangs and then two teens who belong to the opposing gang who have been in love in the past and broke apart and are now being kind of forced back into each other's orbit while they try to solve this mystery in Shanghai of this disease that is running rampant throughout the city, but it's a magical, you know, disease. And I love the characters in this one. I thought the setting was so vivid and so excellently described. I love how badass Juliet is in this book. Like, made me so happy, and all the side characters are great. I love the political dynamics between the two gangs. I love that you can read this not really knowing anything about Romeo and Juliet, and it's still a really great book. But if you are familiar with Romeo and Juliet, there's a ton of Easter eggs to pick up on as you are reading through it. And I haven't finished the duology yet, but I am planning on doing it very, very soon because I just love this book so much, and it just blows me away that this was Chloe Gong's debut. I can't. All right, and this one is standing in for the whole series because the whole series is historical fantasy, even though I haven't finished the series yet, but that's okay. It's A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk, and this is the kind of historical fantasy that I don't really recommend to fantasy readers, but will recommend to historical romance readers because, yes, there's a Venn diagram overlap for those two, but I have found that in general, because this book I feel like has super mixed reviews, and in general I have found that the people that are fantasy readers don't like this one because the romance is a really big part of it. It paces a little bit slower. It paces very much like a historical romance, and I think a historical romance reader who is looking for fantasy is going to be a better pick for this book than a straightforward fantasy reader is. And if you agree or disagree with that statement, I would love to know. Like, tell me all the things, because I find it really interesting who picks this up and loves it and who picks it up and doesn't love it. Anyways, this one, but back to the book itself. This is a historical England. Magic exists, but magic is a deeply kept secret. And so if you are not born into a magical family, you are not going to know that it exists. And like I said, this does have a romance that I absolutely adore. These two together are just the sweetest. This book has an Achillean romance, and book 2, A Relentless Truth, has a sapphic romance, and then book 3, which just came out at the end of last year, A Power Unbound, is another Achillean romance. I think I'm saying that word right. Oh no. It's one of those where I've seen it written down a ton, but I haven't had to really say it out loud. And like I said, I haven't finished the series yet, but I really love A Marvelous Light. It's one of my favorite books. It is very much a comfort read for me at this point, and I don't really recommend it on audio. I don't think the narrator does, like, the voice that he has for the love interest is very annoying, so I don't recommend this on audio, but I do recommend it as a read with your eyeballs pick. All right, and then this is another one. Oh, okay. It's been so long since I've read this book. I can't remember if this is a actual England or a fantasy that's in an England-like setting, but it is Salt Magic, Skin Magic, and I hate this cover so much. And let me tell you, the greatest injustice is that this book has such a horrible cover, because it is such a good romance. It's such a good book. I wish more people would read it, but I think that this cover is so off-putting. But this is another Achillean romance. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's got some fae stuff going on, and I just loved it so much. It was so good. The audiobook for this one is excellent, and I would also, though, check your trigger warnings, because if my memory serves correctly, there is like some domestic abuse in it, and just our the love interest has really had a hard life up to this point. So just, you know, check some trigger warnings, check some content warnings if you swing on to the more sensitive side of reading. But like, if you're looking for a historical fantasy romance that is really underrated, you should read this one. And then my final book, is not technically historical fantasy, I don't think. Maybe, well, I don't think historical sci-fi exists as a genre, so I don't really know where else I would put it, but I really love it, and I really want more people to read it, because it definitely had a moment when it first came out, but I don't think enough people read it when it first came out. But the book I'm rambling about is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, and this is set in the United States in post-Civil War era, and the Civil War was abruptly halted because of the appearance of zombies. And so we're following our main character, Jane, who is a black girl living in the South, and Jane gets put into this school for girls, specifically black girls, who are then trained to be zombie hunters. And it's a duology, and it's great. And this made me into Justina Ireland is a auto-buy author, an auto-read author. I absolutely love her writing so much. I love this duology so much. All the characters are fantastic, and her villains are so insidious. So hard to know who to trust. It's so hard to know who our main characters can trust. And it was just, I had such a fun time reading the whole duology. I believe Bonnie Turpin does the audiobooks, so if you're also a Bonnie Turpin fan, like, it's just magnificent. It's just magnificent. But I just don't know where zombies fall in the genre categorization. So let me know what you think. Do we count zombies as fantasy? Is it sci-fi? Can we have a historical sci-fi? Or does sci-fi by its nature have to be futuristic? I don't know. I have no answers. I just want you to read this book. So that's it. That's the video. Those are all my recommendations. If you have made it to the end, I would love to know what your favorite historical fantasies are, which ones you would put on your list. I did debate putting A Natural History of Dragons on this list, but I've only read book 1 and it wasn't, I really liked it, but it wasn't like a new favorite. So I'm reserving until I read more of the series and then we'll see where I land. But anyways, if you would just like to leave an emoji to let me know you were here. Let's do a flower emoji or a rose emoji because it's on the spine of Leaves Violent Delights, and that's where I'm at with picking emojis right now. So yeah, leave me that and I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye.